for Scott. He's going to be very aware that he's got a chance of winning races this weekend. He'll know that when the season starts now, older than they are with the Ducati, so he wants to make sure that he's able to pad out his wins tally in World SBK this weekend and then spend the winter really building up on that BMW. It looks like he's going to be out on track just before Christmas on that bike down in Jerez as well, so that'll be his first test of the BMW machine.
Well, first lap's about to come in. Riders looking fairly cautious so far, it must be said.
Oh yeah, everyone's just going to be taking it nice and steady at this stage, build themselves up. We saw in the Super Sport class a 1:38 was the fastest time for Manuel Gonzalez, so you'd expect to see the Superbike riders down around the 1:34s by the end of this session, but it's all about just building yourself up to it. You can see there for Toprak.
That's caution, is it?
That's about as cautious as Toprak gets.
Is that a situation that could play against him this weekend, though? We've talked about the fact that it is a big point swing that Jonathan Rea has got to make up. Now, the circumstances in which Rea can make up those points, most likely a retirement for Toprak. We've seen a few of those this season, as you said, through no fault of his own, it should be added. Wet weather conditions, those have been one of the very few things that have played against Toprak at times, most notably in past seasons, but on a couple of occasions in 2021 as well. Or Toprak making an error. Now, it hasn't happened so far this year, but if he is going to go full gas right the way to the end of this season, it is possible that he could get himself into some mischief.
Well, I think you have to look at how many times we've seen Toprak and Jonathan Rea rubbing tyres with one another, how many times we've seen them side by side, bar to bar, all the way through this season. All it takes is a slight misjudgment, or one rider leaning into the other a little bit more, and suddenly you can be on the deck. So for Toprak, that's probably the biggest factor over the course of this weekend. Is he going to change his riding and his race style? I don't think so. That's not how Toprak is. But we could easily have an incident between those two riders because we've seen so much close action between them all the way through this season.
Would he change his approach if he only needed a 10th position in the last race of the season?
I think if it comes down to Sunday, he can change his approach, but it's going to be tough for Toprak to do that. He's very adamant he wants to stick to his guns and win the championship the way that he's been riding all the way through this season, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how he approaches it, especially on Sunday.
To be perfectly honest, if we do get into a situation of Toprak Razgatlioglu racing for race victories throughout this weekend, we wouldn't be surprised, and it would certainly not be something that would go against the grain, as it were. He's never pulled his punches throughout his World SBK career, and certainly not this season.
Yeah, and it's one of those situations where for Toprak, he knows how he's managed to get into this position, and he knows that on his days pretty much unbeatable, and I think he wants to make sure that this weekend he lays down a marker and shows that that's exactly what he's going to expect all the way through.
If anything, he's added an extra level to that since Assen in particular, a weekend where he was caught in the garage saying that's it, the championship's over. It was almost as if at that moment he said, well, from here on in, nothing to lose, because the championship in his mind, well, okay, in the heat of the moment, looked like it was slipping away from him. Jonathan Rea, 3 wins in a row, Toprak a massive margin of points to recover. Twice he's managed to recover points and get back into the lead of this World Championship, and it's a lead that at the moment he doesn't look like surrendering.
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations where Toprak will look at the points that have gone amiss for him from a bit of bad luck. Jonathan Rea will look at the points that have gone away from him, and more often than not for Jonathan, it's been because of his own mistakes. He's had to ride on the limit, and we saw in places like Most and Donington Park and Portimao, he got caught out by that, and those 30 points added up very quickly for him. And over the course of the year, the two riders have been very evenly matched. But you'd have to say, on the balance of how the season's gone, Toprak very much deserves to go into the championship decider with a pretty sizable advantage.
Those 2 retirements in Portimao in particular, very, very costly, both from front-running positions, of course. Earlier in the season, we mentioned Donington Park, race 2, race 1 in Most, all of those costly in terms of points. Ironically, this has been the one season where Jonathan Rea's typical strategy of just banking podiums would have left him there or thereabouts going into this final round with Toprak Razgatlioglu. Precisely this season that Rea's mistakes have crept in for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, but the same can be said for Toprak as well.